So we'll be sending this presentation out to everybody who registered after the event. And on the first page there, you can see there's a link to join the community of practice. We're now over 1,000 people, and we're encouraging people to join. So if you're already a member and you have peers that you would like to make aware of this, please encourage them to join as well. Next slide, Steve. So just going to go through the advanced work packaging community of practice. We've started to put the advisory board together, and we're actually having our first meeting next week. So we have a working vision statement, which we are looking to revise. And it is that the COP is about creating safer, more productive, value-added construction projects. And can I get you to switch to the mission statement? And we do this by creating a community to share knowledge, encourage discussion, and promote adoption of advanced work packaging and other related construction productivity initiatives. So we're actually going to be doing a survey in about a week, asking you, the members, what you would like to get out of the community of practice. And I strongly encourage that you take a few minutes to fill that out, because that will guide the sessions that we're going to be running. It's our intention to have one webinar per week at a minimum over the next year, which is a significant amount of programming, and also to share, I think we have about 150 documents that we'll be sharing, presentations, white papers, that sort of thing. All of that will be rolling out over the next few weeks. Next slide, Steve. We're really fortunate today to have a session on virtual meetings, and we've got 3 subject matter experts, people that are very experienced at this, and fortunately I know all 3 of them. Talking about people, we'll have Mandi, who's the Vice President of Marketing at O3. Talking about process, we're going to have Mehta, who is a consultant for iConstruct. And talking about technology, we're going to have John Rodriguez, who's an account executive over at Autodesk. And we're going to kick this off with Mandi. So Mandi, take it away.
Great, thanks so much, Lloyd. So as he mentioned, I am actually responsible for the communication for O3. I'm a co-founder and on the leadership team. So I have been highly focused over the past couple of weeks on making sure that the communication out to our teams has been effective and providing information on what's going on. And also O3 is a web-based and mobile technology platform. So we do work globally with our clients and are pretty familiar with the virtual environment. So this is something that Lloyd reached out and wanted me to share a couple of things that we've been doing that you might be interested in. But before we get started, I wanted to kick us off with a safety moment. This is a safety moment we've used in the past about incorporating change, whether that's adding a new tool or technology or managing a change in the process side with introducing advanced work packaging, whatever those are. It's really relevant now, though. So there's a lot of change that's happening with coronavirus and some of the ways that we are required to work. And so here's some helpful tips and reminders to keep in mind the mental side of change management, especially for people that are involved in the team. So I won't read through the whole list, but a couple of highlights that I wanted to make. Be sure to find the positive in the situation. Although there are a lot of things that are changing for us, there are some good things that will come of this. We'll be learning new tools and technology, learning new ways that we can communicate with each other. That's great. Be sure as you are communicating that you're asking productive questions and not just making critical comments that aren't really helpful. And take control of the situation. Find out how the situation can work for you. Last but not least, exercise patience. With any change management, it doesn't happen overnight. It can be a bit uncomfortable at first, but just remember that things will improve over time and some great things could come of it. So to get us started on the people side, first and foremost, we always look at safety. And we are in different environments right now. Some important things to remember: if you're sitting in your kitchen chair or if you're in a recliner, that's not something that you've done for a prolonged period of time before. So a good reminder is to make sure that your environment is set up to be conducive to working in this new space, potentially for a few weeks. So make sure your desk chair is properly supporting your body, your materials and your equipment are meeting the needs that you have so you don't end up with long-term damage over time. I put some recommended accessories in there if you are on the phone a lot, like I am, who might want to consider a headset, anti-glare monitors. There are technology hardware stores that is considered essential, so you can still order new equipment. And at O3, we are supporting that and providing any equipment that's requested to make the environment just more conducive to being able to be productive. And a great reminder is to regularly assess your environment. Throughout the day, you may be dealing with lighting changes, temperature, humidity, and noise level changes, just being in a new space. So be sure to check and make sure that you take time and take care of your body as we kind of navigate this new normal. Another piece that we've really been focusing on at O3 is communication. We are all pretty good about town hall meetings and monthly updates, but there's a lot of information that's swirling around. And what your employees really want to know is how the company is addressing these changes. So some things that we're incorporating and just some things that you might want to keep in mind because you may not be addressing these. Be clear and concise about if your office is open or closed, if there's limited hours. Employees are really curious about their healthcare benefits. There's a lot of things. Testing is now free, but they may have other questions about their healthcare benefits and what might be covered or not covered. So make sure there's a contact there for that. And an interesting thing that we've had a lot of questions about financial implications, whether that's with the market, with our company, with any of our clients, those kind of things. So employees really want to know what you're doing to mitigate any risk. So include that in your communication. There's also some things, if you want to cover where your headquarters is, if there's any, we are currently, Birmingham, Alabama is our headquarters. We are currently in a shelter-in-place ordinance, so that's something we have to consider. We can't open our office at this time. And another thing to remember, encourage questions. We actually have an anonymous channel that's available. So some people may be concerned about things that they may not want to talk about on a town hall or group meeting. So just give them avenues to get in touch with you and ask any questions. And one thing that we have found very valuable at O3, we actually have a schedule of when they'll get the next company-wide next communication. So they know every Wednesday to anticipate seeing what decisions have been made, what new things we have going on. So the next thing I wanted to cover is time management. I particularly have had to adjust my work schedule because I do have children at home that are out of school. I do have to deal with things like pets and any of the services that I used to have. All of that is kind of on lockdown right now. So I would recommend that you make a schedule for the week and have your unavailable times clearly marked. So you'll see on my example that I have over to the left that I have indicated working blocks and family blocks. So when I specifically take time to be present with my family or handle things at my home, but I do have available hours in the evening that are abnormal. So I have indicated those on my schedule to allow anyone in the team to schedule time when they know that I'll be available. Another thing that we have found is we are starting to indicate on our calendars if the meeting requires a screen or if it is just a conversation, and we call those walk and talk meetings. So we put that in the subject line, and that just means if you don't need a screen, that's your chance to kind of get up and take a walk and encourage exercise and stretch breaks so that you can still get things done and have conversations with critical teammates, but maybe that doesn't have to be seated in front of the screen. Since we're talking about meetings, we are having to adapt how we handle some of our meetings. So, for example, we have a strategic planning meeting that is generally an out-of-office, 3-day, all-hands-on-deck meeting. Obviously, in this environment, we have to make some changes for that. And no one wants to be sitting in front of a screen for 8 hours at a time. So some things that we're doing to address that, we're revisiting the agenda and making sure we have plenty of time for breaks, stretch breaks, longer lunches, those kind of things. And we're indicating in the agenda when we will be presenting information versus when we will have interactive sections. So for example, if we're covering a particular topic that we want feedback on, the first 15 to 30 minutes may be, here's the information that we're presenting, and then the next 30 minutes will be indicated as an interactive block. So we may have tools in place that allow polling or asking questions or chatting or whiteboarding, for example. So don't leave those standard meetings the way that they have been. Really take a look at how you might need to adjust that to get the interaction and engagement that you want. I wanted to share too some of the tools that O3 currently uses, and I included in there some other examples. So we do host quite a few virtual meetings. Zoom is our choice as of now that we are using. It's been very effective. There are other tools available for that. We also have to at times work in parallel on a document in a wiki fashion so that multiple people can be in the document. And so we're using Notion for that. We have a standard internal messaging, so that's Slack. So one thing that we've done is we've moved any external communication into our email system. So our Outlook is what we're using to externally communicate, but internally we try to manage all of our messages through Slack or a messaging tool. We also have a task management system. We currently use O3. It's web-based, but that just allows us to update any actions, tasks, or decisions that we have available. And that way we can collaborate. It doesn't have to be a phone call. Instead of walking around the office and saying, hey, did you see this? We can assign each other tasks throughout the day and get updates on that in virtual real time. So, and then lastly, whenever we are internally scheduling meetings, we can all view each other's calendars through Outlook. But if we are externally trying to schedule a meeting with multiple people, we're using Calendly, which you can just share your calendar, whatever, if that's a Google Calendar or anything like that, and people can see your availability. They can't see the details of your calendar, but they can see your availability. And I wanted to end on what I think is the most important thing as we're all moving into this virtual environment, which is culture. It's so important to maintain your company's personality, even if you're all working remotely. So some ways that we are doing that, we are recommending virtual one-on-one coffees and lunches. So we used to have team meetings, or people would join each other for a coffee chat or over the water cooler, or they may be would take lunch together, and we're suggesting that people continue to do that. They just do that virtually. We also have started a new thing called a virtual happy hour. So at 5 o'clock, once a week, we get together and share a beverage and a conversation and talk about anything other than work. So you can see kind of a screen grab of that. Our CEO has a great sense of humor. You can see him holding a Corona beer in his hand. But it's been a great way for us to just still hang out and retain our friendships. And just look at moving any of your other events that normally were face-to-face and look at ways to do that virtually. We have a company mascot, and he stands for, it's a giraffe, and it's stand tall is our motto. And it's all about being positive and doing the right thing. So he's appearing quite a bit in our communications. And I'll leave you with the last thing. Whenever you're doing any kind of chatting, whether it's personal or about work or anything like that, it's important to remember that you should talk about what's happening and talk about how people are coping in this, but also remember to stay positive. It won't last forever. We'll get through this together, and it really could be a way to bring us all together even more as a team. So that's everything I wanted to cover today on the people side. I am going to stop sharing now and hand it over to Mark so that he can get us into the process side.
Good day, everyone. My name is Mark Mehta. Today, we're going to talk about process in terms of our current environment and working from home. So I have been with iConstruct for a grand total of about 10 weeks now. Before that, I spent about 14 years with large EPCs. I worked as a field engineer initially, quickly got into data and planning management. So I sometimes like to refer to myself as the computer nerd of construction. So we might jump around a little bit because we're going to talk about consistent process and working from home and the tie between the two. In this current environment, we talk about people, process, technology. So I'm going to cover process, John is going to cover technology, but Mandi, in a way, had the most important part, and that is people. These are some tough times we're going through right now. I woke up to hear some tough news for some people around me, but try to stay positive and find something positive that comes out of this. Appreciate your friends and family more. When we do get together, we'll have a better time and more enjoyment, and we'll learn how to deal with some of these tough times and make us stronger on the other side. So working from home changes things. In some ways, it is for the better. So a lot of people are spending more time with their kids and their significant others and their pets. Mandi showed us some of the tools that we can use to keep connected. I'm glad that she did that, because some of these tools might be easier than you imagine to use. At iConstruct, we use everything. Primarily, we use Zoom for meetings, but we also have GoToMeeting, and we use Skype, and we use Viber. So you can contact us in many different ways. But for everyone else out there, take a look at some of the technology and see the benefits that you can get from it, and realize that it is something that's it might be easier than you think. John's going to talk to us about technology in a little bit. I've used some of their technology on projects and found out how beneficial it was. Today, our discussion gives me a chance to elaborate on one of the things that's very important to me, and is something that should actually be important for your company too, and that's going to be a consistent process. So with the way things are going right now, we can talk about what it takes to work from home, but even when we do work from home, there are some things that we need to keep consistent. So, rebels. Being a rebel can be a very popular thing to do. I've seen a lot of articles talking about how important it is to have rebels in industry and the advantages to them, and how we need to make sure that they are listened to and we don't shut them down. So we will bring up one of the best rebels ever, James Dean, in Rebel Without a Cause, right? So in terms of rebels, here are some articles that I pulled up randomly talking about how important it is to be a rebel. But why? What is the root cause of the rebellion? And does your personal rebellion without a cause, does it provide value? So there are many times when we need rebels. I was considered a rebel at times at EPCs and trying to bring in some new technology, which later became standards, and I was glad to see that. I was fortunate to work for some phenomenal companies. It did a lot for my career, but I love the people that I worked with. So I like to joke with some people, but if we're all rebelling together, are we really rebels? But another big part of this is that what are we rebelling against? And when working from home, it makes it even more difficult to coordinate with your coworkers. So we want to focus on making sure that we have a consistent process and not just going off on our own and doing something without coordinating with others. So in terms of when to rebel and when not to rebel and when to follow an existing process, here's a very useful article illustrating that. So there's a lot of discussion, and I've seen it at conferences, and I've seen it on articles on LinkedIn and other places about disruption. So in order to implement new technology, there's going to be a disruption in the process. So we have disruption and we have random change. So when we hear someone talk about disruption, I asked the question, will that person be standing next to us at the time this disruption occurs? Or in this day and age, will that person be on the phone or on the Zoom or any technology that Mandi has showed us as well? So when someone promotes disruption, ask them, what is your change management process? It's not always easy to implement new technology, but there should be a change management process involved with this as well. So in terms of working from home, our company, iConstruct, has amended our process in terms of we now have weekly meetings. We get together online in small groups to have focused meetings. We just had one this morning that had only 4 people on the line, so we can keep it focused. And with the iConstruct business development person, Andre Perales, we actually coordinate on the phone constantly. So we spoke late last night, we spoke this morning. If you're dealing with someone international, then phone calls might not be as easy, but we do have Skype as well. So we have Skype and other technology when you're dealing with international. And there are some free applications out there for your phone that are good for international texting. One is WhatsApp, another is Viber. So change management. Here is a simplified chart showing a change management process. This is not the exact same process that we would use in the field in industrial construction. It's a little bit simplified, but just to illustrate a point that you have a change management process. So now that we're working from home, the process shouldn't change too much. Say, for example, a designer wants to issue a revised drawing. If they're working from home, it still needs to go through a squad check process. They still need to coordinate with the other disciplines via the web, and they can still get access to document control, possibly, or at least request access to document management system remotely. You might get access, you might not, but at least ask the question in this day and age that things will change. So what we don't want to have happen is that when we're working from home, we just throw the process out the window. And just as one example, a designer will send drawings out without going through a proper squad check, without coordinating with the other disciplines, and without going through document control. So that's just one example. So again, all of this process still applies when working from home. So amend the process. Don't throw the process out the window. So a consistent process is critical for reliable outcomes, but often we need to improve on the process. This change needs to have a legitimate purpose and direction, and needs to be managed. So we need to continue to have a change management process. So when working from home, yes, we want to keep a consistent process, but since we are working from home, we need to amend that process, and there needs to go through a change management process. So consistent process makes a big difference. We need to amend it. When the amendments occur, it needs to go through change management. So if you do make a change, don't forget to communicate the change. As a corollary to this, I was on a project where we used to joke, something similar to this, is that I don't always test my code, but when I do it in production. So we'll go on to the next subject now. So let's say I presented at a conference, Autodesk University in November of 2019, a couple months ago, where I talked about Automagical and actually printed some SQL statements on the screen. We're not going to do that today. We're going to keep this a little bit simple. So imagine you have a data set, all right? Now let's say that we have another data set, and then there's 3 data sets. We'll keep it consistent, right? We got 3 data sets. So now let's enter the rebel. The rebel says, hey, you know what? Those data sets are boring. Let's make this a little more interesting. Let's spice things up and change the data set. Let's make it a different color, change the font, make it harder to read. We're going to put it upside down just to be different, and we're going to make it 2 digits instead of 1 digit just because, you know, we're a rebel, right? So how is someone supposed to interpret and use this information? How is someone going to react to this? If you see a manager that has 3 consistent data sets and then a 4th one comes in and which is completely different, it's difficult for a manager to assess the information and understand it if it's in a completely different format. Separate from that would be from a data manager point of view. And of course, this will apply more to the data people, but when you have inconsistent data, it makes it more difficult to work with. You can't parse information out, and it's difficult to rearrange that information as well. One of the things that we do with models, and we do this, our competitors do a similar concept, is that we can rearrange the model, but it helps out tremendously to have consistent information. So imagine your manager working from home, reading this information. So he can't walk over, excuse me, he or she cannot walk over to you and talk to you about this in person. So when working from home, there will be some greater susceptibility to rebel due to the physical separation that we have. So how's he going to react to it? He's going to shake, and he's going to shimmy, and he's going to be, well, you can see how he is. So again, we're not going to get too technical, but we bring up the terminology codifying, and decodifying. When working from home is all the more reason to focus on clear communication. So we're working from home, the process, we're going to stay consistent, amend the process to make it better. But when working from home, focus on, is the message that you sent is the same as the message that's been received. So what happens is that sometimes when you say something, the other person might not receive the exact same message that you sent. So there's a lot of people like this sometimes, and unfortunately, you see them on construction projects where even in person, you're going to see the message was not received. So it seems like on every project you have one of these who will, difficult to receive the message. So don't let this happen to you. Ensure two-way communication. Have phone calls. Listen to what the other person said. Understand. Make sure that they understand. Have them repeat back to you, and then follow up with documentation and emails. One of the things I learned from emails is that you don't always need to copy the entire world. Sometimes the more people you copy on an email, the more you're just going to frustrate the one person who can help you. So follow the process, amend the process, but don't throw the whole process out the window. Put forth the extra information to ensure that clear communication has occurred. When we're working from home, we still need to have that communication. And we see so many different ways of communicating with the technology out there. And we implement Autodesk technology in Navisworks Simulate and with BIM 360. We work closely with O3 Solutions and see the advantages that they have with package tracking and with constraint management. So we use this technology, but we need to make sure that we have clear communication and we have a process and that we amend the process as required, but don't throw the whole process out the window. So to finish up, what we're going to do is we're going to end on a happy note. We're going to look at a beautiful picture of a beach, and we're not going to listen to Mehta telling you to follow the process anymore, right? So one of the nice things about this picture is that there's nothing to read. We just look at it and relax and enjoy and appreciate the good things that we have in life, right? So there's nothing to read, but note there is a margarita there. So Mandi finished her presentation, and I happen to have seen a picture of Josh Gervin drinking a beer. So I don't know if I can one up that, but hey, just so you know, the liquor stores are still open right now. So relax, enjoy the fun times that we have, enjoy the people that are close to you, and focus on communication, focus on two-way communication, on listening. And now we'll hand it over to Mr. John with Autodesk.
Thank you, Mark. For some reason, can somebody confirm they see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I didn't know if it was showing up. Thanks for that. That was very good. I don't have any alcohol slides, except I can tell you I have a lot of hand sanitizer rubbed into my hands. So I want to thank Mandi and Mark for their insight and how they're approaching this internally at their organizations. I want to thank Lloyd and the group ASI for providing this platform for us. I gave a presentation internally just a week ago for my own team at Autodesk, and it was an interesting scenario because I've been at Autodesk for 5 years and I've been on virtual teams that entire time. So I was happy to have the opportunity to present how we're approaching this from a technology company. I have given this message that the way we do our work today is changing rapidly, and I gave this message just a month ago, and more than ever today, that statement has come to us very quickly, as we know, and as we start to look at how it's impacting our daily lives. The news is coming quickly. It's hard to absorb everything, and in some ways, you can almost get a little paralyzed if you get too overwhelmed by it. So what I wanted to do is change the message to let's focus on how Autodesk has been building high-performing virtual teams, basically a virtual workforce, more around how we approach it, less about our tools today, but more about how we approach it internally. And we really kind of look at it from a three-level tool set, skill set, mindset approach. Someone asked me what the inspiration for this image was, and I thought about who would be the most remote workforce or remote high-performing team, and why not the international space programs, right? More than ever, they have been performing in remote virtual for a very long time, and they have a breakdown similar. And so as we look at one of the very first things, most of my customers that I work with have some level of digital initiative. And as we start to go that route, one of the first things we're going to really need to do that is have a digital mindset, facilitating that collaborative mindset around digital. It's going to be a different way. We need to look at it as the forefront and less as an afterthought. Everything we know about the work that we're doing is changing, including where it gets done, who does it, and how we're going to do it. It's changing rapidly. So I wanted to bring that forward around the mindset. Really, as I look at a digital first mindset, it's really about using technology in innovative ways, but it's more about what we heard from Mandi and Mark around culture and structure and process, and really looking at digital as a way to optimize. As we move away from mindset, and I could spend all day on mindset, but I wanted to look at skill set, we really need to start to sharpen our saw around how we communicate. It'll be an essential component of how we collaborate. I know personally in my teams, we've had to build new range of behaviors and skills around communication. We have really put together more of an approach that has more of a normal behavior, because you're not now in person, you're virtual, and you need to figure out how those norms change. And you need to participate at a different level and make sure that, as we heard from Mandi, you have a regular occurrence of those meetings and interactions with your teams. So I really think that there's a lot of impacts that could happen in collaboration through virtual that you need to mitigate, especially around how the messages are being received. And so as we look at that same skill set, I think there's two parts of the skill set of beyond communicating. It's also about hearing and understanding. And so as we look at communication, really good communication, exactly what Mark just showed, that the message received matches up as closely as the message that was given. This alignment between what is said and what is heard. We're up against a lot of things around, the fact that we have issues with how much memory can we hold, what's our attention span, what's our motivation, just what's our listening capacity. But when we rethink how we engage in meetings, we can really look at a more effective a way of receiving that information. I often say that we can listen with our eyes, and we don't have our cameras on today, but typically I would say that meeting that's virtual with cameras on does really change that behavior of listening. The communicator can also see maybe how that message is being received. So typically I would have my camera on to kind of make sure that we're getting that two-way communication and that personal engagement. When we look at tool set, and I could have certainly talked about Autodesk technologies as a tool set, I tried not to, because I think really the breakdown for moving from the working from home as an exception to the norm, I really wanted to kind of focus in on the me, or the I. You know, how can I empower myself? What do I need to do to get ready? I know personally when I started 5 years ago at Autodesk, there was a certain amount of things I had to put together, and it's going to take you a little bit of time to converge your office now at your home, you know, bringing it together. So you really need to have some basic structure around technology, and some of that's going to be things you already have, and maybe you need to augment that, increase in your internet for your bandwidth, looking at video audio equipment. You know, we heard about headphones from Mandi. So it's certainly those things I need to do for myself. And then I look at what are the things that the organization can do for me. And Autodesk has done a great job of empowering me from day one to be ready and prepared. We certainly can access a lot of internal documents. We can certainly get through VPN gateways, and we have a lot of security appliances in place, voice over VPN. There's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be put in place, and I need that from my organization in order to be effective. What's really interesting is if we look at a 10-year cycle around business mentioning working from home, this graphic's a really interesting graphic. It really shows a flat line for what virtually is a decade, and in the past months, spiking. The fact that we're under demand to do this and effectively do this, this is really what I'm talking to my customers about right now. And it's really, how do they change very quickly, almost flipping a switch, almost moving at the speed of SaaS. And it really is kind of right here and now. And then finally, as I look at tool sets for me, my organization, I also want to start looking at tool sets for my team. And what I can say about the teams I work on, we really have a single source of truth when it comes to what we're working on, documents we're working on. We have access to those documents at the same time. We are collaborating on top of those documents, and we are using them to prepare for those meetings that we have. And we're also training newcomers to the team. So when we bring in new team members, we're quickly onboarding them and ramping them up with a place to go to get access to everything they need, instead of burying it inside of emails or local folders. We're certainly leveraging those technologies so that in a virtual environment, everyone is able to see what's important, focus on what's important. In fact, high-performing teams have the edge of shared view on what is important, and they also are measuring against their progress against those goals. And then finally, as we bring it all together, or bringing the pieces together, this is kind of a glimpse at John's world as he's worked at Autodesk. Me, you know, this is my little space, and it's Command Central, and there's a lot of tools, all kinds of tools, and I've built this tool set over time. Certainly can't absorb it all in one shot. And I'll tell you, you want to focus and spend a little time on your mindset. You want to focus on your skill set and leverage those skill sets you already have, because you're in that role because you have those skill sets. And maybe it's balancing it against a new mindset that you may not have been needing to have, and then bringing it back to some new tools as well as the tools you already know, and it'll work, right? Back to what we heard from Mark and Mandi, that this is gonna pass. We're gonna get there, and on the other side of that, I think we're gonna be better. I think we're gonna be more skilled. I think we're gonna be more ready to perform. We're sort of being put into a position to make those changes now. And finally, as I kind of wrap this up, and I'm looking at the clock here, I think we're going to have a good amount of time for Q&A. You know, Autodesk specifically is engaging with our customers directly, talking to CIOs and key IT groups around licensing, around remote work sharing, and virtualization options. So we're definitely focused on helping you. That's the number one thing that's on our mind, is let's make sure that you know what you have in terms of options, home use on our software. And then when you want to get into conversations about more around the platform, certainly you know, engage with those folks that you work with that are providing you the technologies. And then most likely technology companies, as well as your own companies, have some sort of resource center around what's going on. So look into those resources, tap into them. They're definitely available. We're not alone in this, and we're all trying to come out the other side better. So I want to stop there and transition back.
Perfect, thank you. So at this point, if the panelists are ready, I think we would like to open it up to Q&A. For everyone online, we recommend using the Q&A feature in your attendee panel. You should find the Q&A button through which you can submit a question to any of our panelists. And like I said, questions, comments as well are welcome. We've got about 15 minutes, so they can be related to the topic at hand, or if it's related to advanced work packaging and project performance best practices, I'm sure they'd be happy to field those questions as well.
So, Steve, it's Lloyd Rankin here. Just before we go to the Q&A, I'm going to throw something out to the attendees. Can we go back to the way things were, or is virtual meetings going to be the new normal? And I'm very interested to hear from the attendees if they think that we're going to go back to our old way of working, or if this is going to become the new normal. So just tossing that out both to the panel and to the audience as well.
Yeah, from the panel side, this is John with Autodesk. I would say that there's definitely not a go back 100% to the way it was. I think we've passed a really critical milestone in our personal lives and in our professional lives, and I think that there's going to be a different kind of balance. I don't know if we go all virtual for everything. You just, you know, that's certainly an extreme, but I believe there has been something that's never happened before that is going to change us forever. We're not going to forget about it, and it's going to impact how we look at the future. I really do think the future has arrived.
And yeah, oh, sorry, I was actually going to throw it over to you, Mandi. Go ahead.
Going to say that I think while we'll probably never be the same, I look at it as a positive in how much our industry and the people that I'm talking with every day have just come such a long way in a short amount of time, getting more familiar with interactions using virtual tools. I think that's going to serve us well. I think in the past we've had maybe a little bit of resistance to change, and you know, maybe a little bit of forced change has some good things that will come of it. So we've seen client interactions and interactions with our employees change in just different methods. But now if we are in a situation, for example, where we can't make a meeting in person, or we need to share a screen to facilitate a better conversation, I think there will be even more people that are prepared and equipped to do that and know how to do it and comfortable. And I really think that's going to be a great thing as we move forward.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I've got a question here. This one was submitted anonymously. Real straightforward one. What are some traps to avoid?
Yeah, so I'm actually answering that, but I think from my perspective, you know, the status quo is really a trap. And it goes back to that mindset that we're, you know, if we allow the status quo to be the barrier for us to be effective, I think that's going to be a big trap.
Another trap would be isolation as well. So even without the present circumstances, you don't want to isolate yourself in terms of, we talk about it all the time. ADBP, a big part of it is to break down silos. In this day and age of working from home, I would say what might be the one biggest trap is isolation. Isolation from your coworkers, or if you are isolated, if you're sick yourself, then you're isolated from others. But in any situation, try to avoid too much isolation. Make a phone call, send an email, Facebook, but have communication with the outside world as well.
There's another question here on the virtual world, working with legacy applications, how to approach it in this unprepared circumstance. I think there are some options. It might come from your organization, and it might also obviously involve your technology partners, but I'm not going to speak specifically. Obviously, we provide technologies that can be virtualized, but I'll tell you that I think this, as I stated earlier, we just passed a line that will change the way we do things and the way we work. I believe it puts pressure on technology providers to start putting their tools into an environment that can be done without an actual desktop, and really focused around the capabilities wrapped around your project intelligence, your project data. It really becomes a data conversation, accelerating the vision of people's data maturity and the ability to have that functionality in the cloud. And we can get into a whole mess of things like cloud security and all that, but I do believe that it's going to accelerate and put pressure on technology providers just as much as your organizations to provide that ability.
Okay, excellent. Well, so anyone want to add anything further to that, or?
One thing I wanted to mention, Steve, on the traps, one of the things that I have noted over the past couple of weeks is there are quite a few of us that have been working in virtual environments for a while. You could definitely reach out. Attending this webinar is one great way. Reaching out and asking people what works best for them is good. One of the traps that I would like to kind of highlight is not everyone has stopped working or slowed down working. So in a lot of cases, I begin to see people thinking that all of a sudden we have more time available or more free time available. And we do, because not all of us are commuting in and those kind of things, but just be cautious and respect other people's time, and understand that while we may be not commuting as long, we are handling other priorities and things that are coming up, whether it's communicating more regularly with our employees and our teams, but we are making changes and having to do things we weren't doing before either that are taking up some of that time. So throwing a 3 or 4 hour meeting on someone's calendar because you think it's open, think twice before doing that. Be respectful of their time and ask, if they have bandwidth to take on anything new or new meetings before just making that assumption.
Thanks, Mandi. And we have a question from Luigi and Selmi from Technomont, and I would like to give Mark the opportunity to start with the responses on this one, but it's kind of a two-part question. I'll do my best to convey it here. For sure, after the crisis, the ways of doing work won't be as they were before. Industry will move to delocalized work, i.e. smart work. Sorry, just taking a pause. I had a network interruption, and I think that actually is very timely considering the question here. Although certain industries shall adopt different solutions to keep with businesses covering their needs, how strong is the infrastructure bearing the augmented traffic of data, and how can we optimize the exchange of information? So sorry if I didn't do that one service, Luigi, but I'll let Mark answer.
So one of the biggest keys is upfront preparation. So we were a little bit fortunate at iConstruct in that we have some standard tools that we use in terms of Zoom and Dropbox, but we also use a huge multitude of technology to communicate with each other outside the standards. Say, for example, Skype. We Skype with each other. We use other applications as well. So a key to optimization is going to be preparation. So don't wait for something to go wrong and then react. But of course, it is quite amusing that Stephen just had a network glitch at the same time Mr. Luigi is asking how strong the infrastructure is bearing the augmented traffic of data. From what we've seen, it's actually been relatively smooth. I haven't seen dropped calls or missed messages. We have Skype meetings, we have Zoom meetings. When we tested for this process that we're doing today, we did discuss, is there a lag on the video? And we haven't actually seen much of a lag either. So the infrastructure has shown to be strong, but the way to account for it is to have your upfront preparation. And then if you don't have preparation upfront, communicate the possibilities to your coworkers. Work with them, call them and say, hey, I know you might be concerned about this new technology. It's not that bad. I'll get you started.
And I'll kind of dovetail in around, it's work breakdown. It's also work structure. Many times our work is overloaded in structure or overloaded in size. But I will tell you that it's interesting to see things behind the scenes. I work for obviously a technology company, and I know that we have been definitely focused on how to facilitate access to just the data that you require to make your project decisions. In other words, do I need to see the entire project, or can I keep track on areas that engage with my work and keep me in line with any changes happening on that part of it only, that I do not have to have the entire machine, if you will, in front of me, or processing in front of me, where literally I'm being fed changes that affect the work I'm doing. And I'll kind of leave it at that. But there's definitely, and you start thinking about quantum calculations and quantum computing, what we're scratching on just now is really just the surface of what's possible with quantum computing and cloud computing capabilities. So I believe we're really at early stages of all this and what's going to be the power of the cloud. And then last thing I'll say is they're wrapping the world in fiber and 5G, and there's a reason for that.
Great point. Great point. Thank you, John and Mark. We've got a couple other questions that have come in. I'm just taking a quick look here. This is kind of interesting. How would you bring a new person that you haven't worked with before into your remote working environment at this stage?
I can speak to what we're doing right now. I know that we have new team members every year, basically, and so we're putting data in a single place where we can prep them, bring them on board, basically. Orient them on what we're doing, and then we isolate down to what are the 3 major goals for this year with this particular effort that we're working on, and we try to reduce the noise. There's a lot of noise that happens in the world. There's not a lot of noise that happens in work, and if we can reduce a newcomer to just focus on what's important for the team and keep them out of all the other riffraff that they're going to get into, I think it helps. And then over time, you can kind of open the throttle a little more on information that they need to have. So you kind of have to ease them in to the super highway that we're working on.
I definitely would echo that. So we call it crawl, walk, run, or a 30, 60, 90-day approach, where we really try to focus in on what they need to know in their first 30 days. So whether that's about the company, about our tools that we use internally, communications, And we clearly communicate that. So it's documented for them. This is what is expected of you to know or to be aware of in the first 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. And just at a more simple level, we've created little tools and checklists to make sure that they're prepared. So we know when we introduce a new team member on day 3, they may have to be on a meeting that requires Zoom or communicating with their team via Slack. And so we have some easy how-tos, not covering the entire tool set and everything it could possibly do, but what you need to know to get started. So how to open a Zoom meeting, how to click through to share, those kind of things, and then have some helpful links if they want to read more. Quite a few of the tools that we use have really helpful video tutorials. And so we share those as well. So I really think it's focusing in, as John mentioned, on what the most important things they need to know right away and slowly introducing them over time is a great approach.
I see one here on managing stress that comes with the current situation we're dealing with, and then how working remotely. I think we touched a little bit on this isolation part of it. I will say that you should probably try to maintain some level of personal exercising or personal, whatever it takes. And I know there's a lot. I personally am looking at things like Peloton bicycles that connect you virtually with others and you can work out together. Similar, we heard about virtual happy hours, and I think those are all good things to employ. And I think if you find a balance of reality with the craziness that we're dealing with, that'll kind of take it away a little bit. And also, sometimes you need to shut the door and say work is done at this time and move on into your family life.
Very apt, John. I would like to just mention we're about 2 minutes away from the hour. There's still questions coming in and comments. For anybody not able to have their question or comment addressed in this hour, I would encourage you to join the LinkedIn group, Advanced Work Packaging Community of Practice. We'd love to see your questions and comments there, and the panelists can continue to respond in that forum. Maybe just to close us off, I'll propose a quick roundtable. The recurring message of staying positive in spite of the challenge that we're facing right now. Would each panelist like to give some closing comments, maybe talking a little bit about some positive change that they've seen or some positives that they've experienced so far with having to quickly adapt to the current situation, maybe starting with Mandi?
Sure. So we've actually seen an increase in team members that might not work together as often, having more personal contact. We are remotely located throughout the country and the world. And so just having and hosting some of these virtual happy hours and book clubs and lunch and learns, we're using video a lot more. And so it's really introducing team members that may not have really ever had as much contact with each other, which has been really great. And people sharing, background information, experience that they use personally that we weren't aware of. So it's really brought that to light. And we've had some really great conversations about Tiger King too. So the Netflix series is great and horribly terrible, but wonderful.
It's on my to-do list. Mark.
Compassion. So one of the positive things that we do see is that we hear about negative stories in the news. I keep up with the news all the time, especially in this day and age. I read news online. But you do also hear about the positives and the compassion that people show for each other. With people process technology, I can be a little bit obsessive about a defined process. I implement technology for a career, but most importantly is people. So one of the positives that we see is that people do care about each other, make sure we have some questions about how to deal with the stress, and the answers are going to be is to communicate with others and think about other people as people, have concern for the well-being beyond just technology and work.
Perfect. And John?
Yeah, I would say that I've seen rapidly this transition of the customers I work with, and I work with a set small list of customers, and I'm very happy to see that they have reached out to us quickly about how we can help them, and they've come to us more as a trusted advisor and asking for advice and guidance. It's changed, to oftentimes we're thought of as a vendor, and we provide technology, but they're actually coming to us and we're talking to them about things that have nothing to do with our technology. We're talking about stuff like we just talked about today, and how do you ramp up? What do you need to focus on, and what's important to get you operational, and really empathy on that partnership.
Okay, and then to close us off, our facilitator, Lloyd.
Sure. First and foremost, I really want to thank our presenters today, Mandi and Mark and John. Agreed to do this within a 1-week time period, and I think they did a spectacular job. We are offering webinars every week now, which is going to be interesting. We've got a number of them lined up, but we do need to hear from you, members of the community, as to what you're interested in. And we're also looking for suggestions as to sessions we can do, presenters that we can support. So please stay in touch. The one thing I will say is I personally have been actively working on building my personal network. And I think that all of our presenters commented on the fact that we don't want to be isolated. We want to have connection. And I think that if we want to do that, we have to put some effort into it, but I think it pays dividends. So strongly recommend you reach out and connect, and not just with your work connections, but also, find out how your friends and family are doing, and do what you can to support people. It may be virtual, but people do appreciate that outreach.
Lloyd, thanks for bringing that up. I'm glad you talked about that. Yeah, reach out to everybody, not just in terms of work. We're here to talk about work on this LinkedIn group, but we got to look out for all the people around us regardless, right?
Absolutely. And I just want to thank everybody for taking the time to join today. As I said, there's going to be another one in a week. But if you have questions, post them on the community of practice. We will work to get you answers. And thanks for everyone in attendance. That's our presenters and also all of the attendees. So thanks very much, and we'll call this to a close.